Today, I'm going to share with you the easiest and fastest way to remember your major and minor chords. You're not going to believe how quickly you'll be able to go from chord to chord. We'll also talk about how to make and play the less common chords, diminished and augmented. This is a continuation of the Ultimate Roadmap to Piano Chords, a 6-part series to learn and play every single kind of chord and sound amazing while doing it. Last week, we learned how to build and name major chords, and I gave you a major chord cheat sheet, as well as some chord exercises. So check that out if you missed it. Okay, let's start with the good stuff. The first thing to realize is that if the bottom note of a major or minor chord is white, then the top note will also be white. If it's black, it'll be black. And there are 2 outliers, and that's B flat and B. So for now, ignore those. Let's say you want to play a C major chord. We know that the bottom note is the name of the chord, so put your thumb on C, and it's a white key. So you automatically know that the top note is going to be a white key. Now, most of you probably have heard of 5-finger positions, and that's just when each finger gets a key in consecutive order. Once you have the name of the chord and the white or black of it, then get your hand in a 5-finger position and the top is going to be also a white. Now here's the trick. When I put my hand in this 5-finger position on C, notice how finger 3 only has 2 available notes to play, either here or here, because fingers 2 and 4 are already taking up the notes on the side. So I can play this or this. To play a major chord, always pick the higher of the 2 options. Here's my outer white, and here's the higher of the 2 options that I have. So that's my major. To play a minor chord, pick the lower of the 2 options. Now, you might be thinking, but C is the easiest of all keys. There's no way it'll work for the other chords, but it does. Let's take A, for example. A is a white key, so the top note is white as well. Plunk your fingers down into a 5-finger position, double check that the top note is white, and if you're wondering where to place your fingers in a 5-finger position, usually it's where your fingers most comfortably lie. And now, here are fingers 2 and 4. So now we see that finger 3 only has 2 options. I can play either this one or this one. And this one is higher, so that's going to be my major chord option. And if I pick the lower one, that's my minor chord option. Now let's make it really difficult and start on a black key. How about E flat? Black key on the bottom, so we know black key on top. So E flat, F, G, A, B flat, because we know it has to be a black key. But now, with all of these other kind of keys smushed in the middle, it's not so obvious where the rest of our fingers need to go for a 5-finger position. Here's the trick for that. First, to the second note always needs to be a whole step. So here's the first note, not this one, because that's just a half step. There's our whole step. So these are our finger 3 options. So now we already know finger 5 is on the black key, and here are our 2 options for finger 3. The top note makes an E flat major chord, and the lower note makes an E flat minor chord. One more. Let's do G flat, a very difficult chord. So bottom note black, top note black. G flat, A, B, C, D. And then a whole step from the first key to the second finger, that's a half step. So here's our whole step. So now these are our 2 finger 3 options. The top one equals major, and the lower one equals minor. So that's the speedy and easy way to quickly find any major or minor chord. It's a more tactile approach and will help you be able to quickly pick out your chords when you need them. Now, I feel like I've never heard anyone explain it that way before, but let me know if you actually have heard this explanation and does it actually make sense to you, or am I being crazy? Now, for the outliers B and B flat, You're just going to have to memorize the notes of the chord using the major chord formula of half steps that we learned last week and the minor chord formula that we're about to learn right now. To make any minor chord, take the starting note, and we'll do B, then count up 3 half steps. 1, 2, 3. Remember, a half step is 1 key to the very next key. So here's the middle note of the chord, and now count up 4 half steps to get to the top note. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you remember the major chord formula, this is exactly opposite. Major was up 4 half steps, then 3 half steps, and minor is up 3 half steps, then 4. Okay, let's talk about the less common chords, diminished and augmented. The diminished chord formula is starting note, we'll just do A, plus 3 half steps, 1, 2, 3, and then 3 more half steps, 1, 2, 3. So this is an A diminished chord. The name makes sense because it's even smaller than a minor chord, so in a sense, it's diminished. So an augmented chord is starting note, we'll just do G, plus 4 half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 4 more half steps, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is larger than a major chord, so it's augmented. And this would be G augmented. Last week, we learned that a major chord is indicated with the uppercase letter name of the chord. A minor chord also uses the uppercase letter name of the chord, but follows that with a lowercase m for minor. A diminished chord can be written a couple of different ways. You'll either see the name of the chord in uppercase followed by dim, or the chord name followed by a tiny little circle that looks like a degree sign. An augmented chord is indicated with the name of the chord in uppercase followed by a plus sign. So I've made cheat sheets for all minor, diminished, and augmented chords that you can download for free in the description. And I did make a major chord cheat sheet that you can download as well, but that's in the video 1 description of this series. Here are some exercises that will get you more familiar with major, minor, diminished, and augmented chords. Now, I know you're smart and you understand intellectually how to make these chords and what the symbols mean, but that's honestly not really worth a whole lot if you can't easily play these chords. So this is an essential step. Do not skip these exercises. Every chord makes a certain shape on the piano, and by devoting ourselves to these exercises, we begin to memorize what each chord feels like. Now, it takes a minute, but be patient and it does work. The first exercise is minor chords chromatically up and down. Very similar to our major chord exercise that we did last week. By the way, with all of these exercises, I highly recommend you start with just one hand at a time. Okay, so then do the same thing chromatically, only play diminished chords. Then augmented. Augmented chords are very tricky and we don't see them that often. So just keep that in mind when practicing these chords and try to balance your practice accordingly. Okay, then the next exercise is playing broken and blocked diminished chords with different fingering variations. Now, last week I talked about how important it was to stick with the same fingerings, at least in the beginning stages. However, varying our diminished chord fingerings will be helpful down the road when we work on 7th chords. Here's my diminished chord on C, and I first want you to do fingers 1, 2, 3. Then lift and play the C diminished chord an octave higher. And then go back down and play the same C diminished chord, but now use fingers 1, 2, 4. And then another variation, same chord, 1, 3, 5. You'll go up the scale chromatically, playing each diminished chord 3 different times with those 3 fingering variations, and then kind of the same thing for the left hand. So the first variation is 5-3-2. And then 5-3-1. And then go up a half step doing 5-3-2. And then 5-3-1. Now, these exercises, especially with the diminished and augmented chords, are very, very tricky. So if you're kind of just starting out, and even if you've been playing piano for a while, but chords in particular feel new to you, just take this information, tuck it away, know that it exists, it's there, but I would put most of my focus on major and minor chords. Finally, practice going from major to minor. Up a half step, major, minor, up a half step, okay? And I want you to continue all the way up to the C and then back down and then go major to augmented. Again, start hands separately if you're unfamiliar with chords. Major, augmented, major, up a half step, augmented, major, augmented. Now, did you notice when we go from a major chord to an augmented chord, the only note that changes is the top note. It moves up a half step. And then finally, minor to diminished. C minor, C diminished, up a half step, so C sharp minor, C sharp diminished, D minor, D diminished. And you keep going. When you go from a minor chord to a diminished chord, the top note changes only, and that goes down a half step. With exercises like these, feel free to make different variations. For example, you could make any of these into broken chords. Making up variations keeps you engaged and can be a fun creative process. So if you're bored in your practice, it might be your fault. It's kind of harsh, but also kind of true. So already, in the second lesson of 6 in this series, you should be able to play many lead sheets out there, and I'm going to link a few for you to check out. Next week, we're going to dive into 7th chords, which is a bunch of fun. So until then, take care, and I'll see you next time.